Do you want to start? I mean, so the topic today is how emotional distress can cause disease.
First of all, the title alone, I think, says a lot. Emotional distress and dis-ease. And quite honestly, what I think about is myself and the various clients that I've spoken with. And when I speak to clients, I always encourage people to be curious about, why do I do this behavior? Why do I react this way? Why am I responding this way? Even with ourselves, because what I have noticed is, for example, a lot of clients who have autoimmune diseases or Hashimoto's, for example, I always ask them, when did this diagnosis come up? And did anything significant happen in their life? And nine times out of 10, Kat, they say, I had a very significant stress event that happened, like a few months before, or a few months before I started feeling these symptoms. And I'm like, that is super interesting. That is not by chance, in my opinion. And if we look at the research, a lot of people who have autoimmune diseases, for example, or just dis-ease, there's some kind of connection to a stress response or trauma that happened in their life. So I just think we have to pay attention to that and be very aware, and again, be very curious and ask ourselves deeper questions if we are struggling with maybe dis-ease or even behavioral things that we're doing. So what about you? Have you maybe experienced dis-ease or changes in your behavior connected to a trauma response, or even dealt with clients who you've recognized are dealing with that?
I would say both. Full disclosure, I have been subject to a lot of trauma in my life, starting at a very, very young age. And
Yeah.
it didn't really stop until right after high school. And
Mm,
that's when the real work began. And when when I'm under that much stress and it's constant and I don't have a lot of tools in order to mitigate it, in order to heal from it,
mm,
it's like there's an opportunity within my mind and body for things to fester. And they
yeah.
certainly did. I can share with you that in my very early 20s, I had headaches all the time. And I
Mm,
didn't know where they were coming from. And full disclosure, I was constipated for most of my life. It
yeah.
wasn't until I was in my mid 20s did I get a handle on that. But I was like reliant on stool softeners. I was, it was so frustrating. It was so frustrating. It's weird to just kind of think back on that because, that was never something that, like, I was never told to eat fiber. I was never told to, like, here, we're going to go on the other end of the spectrum. I was never told to, like, have feelings. I was always told to, you know, don't have feelings,
Mm,
don't feel. And I think what happens is when you combine things that you put into your body and things that you put into your soul or your heart, so to speak,
yeah.
these things are a recipe for disease. This is a breeding ground for dysfunction in the body.
Yeah.
And the way that it showed up that's so apparent is constant headaches, being constipated, having chronic low back pain for 10 years of my life, starting in my early 20s,
Yeah.
and then going all the way up into my early 30s. And it's, again, now that I'm in my mid 40s, it's
Hmm.
hard to remember, but then again, it's not, because it was in my life for so very long.
Yeah. I just, I really want to hold space for you because you are an example of someone who did the work. And I feel like as children, especially, that childhood trauma, that childhood distress is very hard because children don't know. Like, children don't know how to manage this emotion. And it's interesting. I heard, and I don't have the exact research, but I did hear that when we are taught to suppress our emotions, right, it impacts our immune system. And that says a lot about the things that you were feeling. And so many people, I feel like, have experienced like a suppressed immune system, or, even noticing like when a really stressful event comes up, you get sick the next day. Like all of a sudden you start to feel really sick. It suppresses our immune system. And that's why I go back to, I think we have to be curious with ourselves, because unfortunately, not all doctors, but I feel like a lot of traditional doctors, they do not ask the questions. It's like, oh, you have headaches? So let me give you this medication. And you take this medication. Or you're constipated? Let me give you a stool softener. It's not, you have headaches? Well, when did these headaches start? And did you notice anything that happened in your life that caused the headaches? Or like, there's no curiosity. And I feel like so much of our society is medicated, when my hope would be if we could get curious and ask ourselves these deeper questions, or even doctors asking the deeper questions, or psychologists asking the deeper questions, would we be so medicated today in our society? You know?
I don't think we would. I feel like in my mid to late 20s, that's when I became a holistic health practitioner. That's when I got my certification. And I went to school for 3 years, and I was learning about plant medicine, and I was learning about nutrition on all different levels, sports nutrition, how to be vegan and do it completely and safely, just as an example. And it boils down to this. When you're working with a client and you just get curious, watch what can happen.
Yeah.
It's amazing when people feel heard and when people feel cared about, and when you can speak from your own experience. For example, I'm going to talk about this because it's near and dear to me, but
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody can relate, but when you are constipated, it does not feel good. You don't feel light. You don't feel energetic. You feel sluggish. You feel heavy. And for most of my life, that's how I felt. And so when I got a handle on that and I did it the right way, with fiber, with exercise, with movement, with hydration, and
Yeah.
ultimately talking about it with people,
Mm.
that's when, like, this is something that I feel like I'm the master of. Like, I can help people get this straight in their life.
Yeah.
But some people, they don't want to hear about it. They're like, oh, I'm uncomfortable. And it's like, well, that might also be contributing to why it's not optimal for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. You gotta be comfortable being uncomfortable. I
You
feel
got to
like,
be
and
willing to go there.
you gotta be willing, oh my gosh, to really go there, because that could be the shift that you need. I always tell people there's a mind body connection. There really is a mind body connection. And even connected to the emotional distress and the trauma, I believe too that a lot of us who have dealt with some form of trauma, I mean, acute trauma, maybe it wasn't chronic trauma, but acute trauma that may have happened, but it happened in certain times of your life, and it impacted you, or chronic trauma obviously can impact people really, really deeply. And then I think there's also like this vicarious trauma where we are empathetic toward people and we hear stories and we take it in. And especially in our role as health coaches, oftentimes people are sharing so much and we have to really be protective. We can be empathetic, but be protective of ourselves to make sure we're not falling into this deep emotional distress. But my point is, I feel like a lot of people, when they have this emotional distress, they also start can pick up on behavioral changes. For example, they may drink, they may vape or smoke or have a lot of sex, just casual sex with all kinds of people. Like there's all kinds of vices that people may have. And it may be like, it's okay. Like this is just who I am. This is how I do it. But they haven't got curious with themselves to ask themselves, are these behaviors connected to my trauma? And then on top of that, what are these behaviors doing to my body? What are these behaviors? How are they impacting my health? And then what are the things I'm saying to myself? I don't deserve a good life. You know, I should suppress my emotions, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy. Like all these negative self talk that is connected to the mind body connection, I feel impacts so much of who we are and the deep layers of our cells and our immune system and how our body is able to heal itself. So that was a lot, but
Yeah, but that was so good. And I know that there is a lot to unpack there, but you touched on so many important key points that are crucial to look at if when you are in self-discovery, when you want to dig deep and you want more for yourself. The one thing that came up to me when you were talking about negative self-talk is like, I don't deserve love. You know, that's something that I don't want to admit, but that definitely has crossed my mind in the past. I don't feel that way anymore, but
yeah,
it certainly has been there. I've had my dark times. And the thing is, if you feed those types of negative thoughts,
yes,
they will grow the same way that positive thoughts will grow.
yeah,
And if you take it a step further and think, if I'm continuing to feed the negative thoughts, what will that manifest into? Will that show up in other ways in my life?
yeah,
And I have seen negative self-talk, especially, you know, what's the most gut-wrenching is when you see a beautiful person, a heart of gold, have
yeah,
such negative self-talk about themselves, not other people, about themselves. And
yes,
then you watch them, that you watch their health be affected by this. I I have a very dear person in my life who I'm thinking of right now, and it is literally gut wrenching to know that there are beautiful people out there who feel so low about themselves,
yeah,
and they're on every prescription medication.
mm,
Sometimes I wonder if it's to get attention
mm-hmm.
from doctors, from friends, from family. And when you're ready, I'm going to share something about how when we don't listen to our body, it can
Mm-hmm.
really cost us, because I think that the body tells us so much. It can be subtle and it can be wildly overt, but
Yeah,
either way, the mind is powerful and we can choose to not listen, or we can.
yep. And why wait for our bodies to scream before we do, before we do listen? Which I know that a lot of maybe even my family members and people like I've just come in contact with, it wasn't until their body was screaming with dis-ease or I'm so fatigued, I'm so tired, I don't know why, that they finally started to listen. And I would encourage people to listen to the whispers, like really get intuitive. And to your point about the negative self-talk, when we have this negative self-talk, like you said, and we're saying it over and over, I'm not worthy, I don't deserve love. you draw that to you. And you have to teach your brain the truth. Your brain doesn't necessarily know the difference between I'm not worthy, I am worthy, if you're teaching it to correlate with I'm not worthy. You know, there's a I think Dr. Carol Leaf is one of the researchers who talks about like neuroscience and the brain and the connective neurons and how they change when you have negative self talk versus positive self talk. Basically, real quick, the negative self talk basically kills a lot of the neurons, like the stems, and the positive. She said when they did brain scans, they could actually see lights like go off on those neuron tips, which is pretty amazing. And so I would encourage people to really be mindful of their self talk, because that self talk, even like, oh, my mom had cancer, so I'm going to have cancer too, you know, or my parents or my everybody in my family, suffered from diabetes, so I'm going to have it's like you're manifesting this into your own system. But you have the power to change your self talk, and you have the power to change behaviors that perhaps your family members didn't do, so that you can live a healthy lifestyle. Genetics definitely play a role in disease for sure, but I believe we have so much power in how we live, how we think, how we heal, in terms of how we can really have good quality of life with all those things. So, yeah, that's
That
mine.
is so well said. And I'm glad you touched on cancer in particular because, I have breast cancer on both sides of my family, on my mom's and on my dad's. And for
Mhm.
me, that has never like deeply scared me. What
Yeah.
it has done, it makes me go to my annual visit with my primary care physician every year. I get
Yeah.
my mammogram and then I get my breast MRI because it's recommended. And I'm just mindful and I just know that I have to pay attention to these things. I got the BRCA test. I'm actually waiting on results currently for any cancers that I might be predisposed to genetically. And
Right.
the thing is, that stuff does not scare me. I have a different mindset when it comes to it. Instead of being the person who doesn't want to know, I
Hmm.
am the person who wants to know. I
Yeah.
want to get ahead of it so that if I am predisposed to something, I
Yeah.
can be more mindful moving forward on how I approach my health because, I'm not perfect and I'm not strict. I have had moments in my life where I've been very strict with my diet and very strict with my exercise and very strict with my sleep. But
Wow.
now I'm much more loose because I feel like as I get older and hopefully a little wiser, I'm more
Yeah.
flexible.
Yeah.
I'm not as rigid. I'm more
Yeah.
flexible and I have more balance in my life because now I have more room for love.
Mm.
And when you are so adamant about being rigid and strict with certain things, it, for me at least, it didn't allow space for other things that cannot be rigid. Like
Yeah.
love, for example, like friendships. These things are very fluid. They are very, do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I think too, having that rigid mindset is not sustainable at the end of the day.
No, it's not.
It is not. There is something about telling yourself, I cannot have this ever again, that forces your brain to say, why not? Sure you can. You should go eat that cookie that you're telling yourself never to eat again. Um, so I think to your point, we have to be mindful. Yes. We have to build awareness. We have to be proactive so that we can take necessary steps to be healthy and take care of ourselves. And it's important that we do these checks. I know a lot of people who are scared to go to the doctor. They're
Yes, me too.
scared. Yes. And I love naturopathic medicine. I love functional medicine, but I think doctors have their place, obviously, right? And it's important for people to get these checkups and to check in. and make sure that they are really truly being proactive. And it kind of goes back to even like getting blood work. And it's something very interesting too, Kat, that I wouldn't say I discovered. I didn't discover, but in my coaching calls, when I noticed people have a cardiovascular disposition or they have something going on with their cardiovascular health, I always ask also, is there anything going on in your life that is emotionally heavy, emotionally draining, anything happening? And that's another one that comes up where people say, yes, I just went through a divorce. I just, lost a family member, for example, or I had childhood trauma. And it's always interesting that cardiovascular connection and that emotional distress or trauma, there's a connection. It's not by chance. I tell people this is not by chance when you see it over and over and over again. And so in that situation, I always say, obviously, I'm not a counselor, but in health coaching or coaching anyways, you can go deep. People trust us, which I'm very honored, that people feel that trust and that space to share. And so when I talk to people who say they had emotional trauma, the next question is, okay, so now what are you doing to manage this trauma? What have you done? Are you taking the necessary steps to heal? Are you doing deep breathing? Are you going to therapy? Because that's so important that people do not neglect their emotional distress that they have experienced. They don't sweep it under the rug, which a lot of us do. So just an interesting connection that I've noticed with the cardiovascular health.
I
Have
love
you,
that.
I was going to say, have you ever, I'm sure you have seen people who were married and a partner died and like a month later the other partner passed away?
My great grandma, the lady I'm named after, Catherine,
Mm-hmm.
she, God, she was such a lovely lady. And when she passed away, my great grandpa died 1 year later. And my
Mm-hmm.
dad said that he died of a broken heart. And I visited him. I got to see him after my great grandma had passed away, and I could tell he was different. He was
Yeah,
different. His best friend was no longer here.
yeah,
And I have heard of this before, but I actually saw it. I mean, it's making me feel emotional right now because it is true. I was also thinking of, and I've seen this a lot, and I've seen this within myself, when people are in an unhealthy romantic relationship.
mm,
I've seen it, and I've lived it. The connection here is when you are under constant stress,
mm,
emotional stress, you are taxing the organs in your body.
yeah,
You might have more cortisol coursing through your body
yeah,
than you should. And you might be taxing that immune system more than it would be. And when it's doing that, and you are subject to like normal colds and flus and little bugs out there, your immune system might not be running optimally. And so
yeah,
you might get sick. Whereas if you were not under that same kind of stress, your body might have been able to fight it off.
yeah.
I noticed this with myself. Like, for example, I have asthma and I have exercise induced asthma. So
Mm-hmm.
when I work out really, really hard in the cold, I get a flare up and I get phlegm in my lungs. And if I do experience anything stressful after that, this will
Mm-hmm.
become some sort of cold. It'll become some sort of sinus infection because I'm more susceptible. So if I get in a fight with my partner, if I get in a fight with my friend, if I get in a fight with my dad, if I have a stressful work situation,
Yeah,
it doesn't matter what it is. I know myself I will get sick.
Mm.
And I also know the power of the mind. I could tell myself like, hey, you will not get sick. You are healthy. You are good. But
Mm-hmm.
there is a fine line. There's a balance between telling yourself that you want to be true and also knowing that your body is talking to you. In this case, my body was telling me, "Hey, you've kind of taxed your lungs right now. You need to rest. You need
Yeah.
to recover from that. Even though you want to tell yourself like you're good, you can get through anything, like listen to me."
That's right. That's back to listen to the whisper, listen to the experience. Don't let it scream at you. Don't let your body start screaming at you before you're like, okay, okay, I hear you, I hear you. And I always tell people I feel so blessed that I had a great childhood. I I have amazing parents. I just felt very protected and safe. And I believe that because I had that upbringing when I was in a traumatic experience, when I was married, there was definitely trauma throughout that marriage. And it made me think, our cortisol, our fight or flight hormone is there for a reason. So, like, if we're in the wilderness and a crazy dog that has rabies is coming toward us, right? Like our cortisol and our adrenals, our fight or flight are going to tell us to fight or run. And that's healthy. But imagine even a child being in a position where this dog with rabies is constantly coming in their house and they don't know how to navigate it. That fight or flight is going off and going off and going off constantly. And I can only imagine, what does that do to a child, to their brain, to their immune system, to their digestion. And they grow up into adults and they either can learn to manage or they can get the healing that they need. But the reason I bring that up is because I believe it's a lot more challenging when you have childhood trauma, because you're still developing, like your brain is developing, your little body is still developing, and then you don't have necessarily the tools to know how to manage these emotions. And so, is there a solution? I don't know, but I hope that people, especially parents, can get educated, right? Because I feel like a lot of parents also are bringing this generational trauma to their kids. This is how my dad and my mom were, so this is how I'm going to treat you. It's like this generational thing. And so that's why I think it's so important for us to do the work and to get the healing so that we have the proper tools to be good parents, to be good friends, to be good lovers. And then also, when I went into a more traumatic experience and when I was married, I feel like I had tools, but I also was discovering a lot about myself. And I had to recognize that even though I wanted to have this picture of a family because that's how my parents made it for me, it was not healthy for me or my children. The traumatic experience that they were experiencing, which is their story to tell, was impacting them. And I had to really make a hard choice to make sure that even though this is, scary and getting a divorce and this and that, I wanted to make sure that my children and myself could go through this healing journey, right? And have the proper tools and make sure that I was healed in a sense so that I don't get sick. Because I know I had a lot of sleepless nights because I was stressed and like the constipation, like you were saying. Actually, I never connected the dots, but I think if I think about it, I had a lot of constipation and that didn't start until those traumatic experiences started to happen. So it plays a huge role in our digestion, our gut health. So it goes back to get curious.
Get curious. And God, you pointed out so many interesting things, and you asked, like, you can't even imagine what it must be like to go through that childhood trauma where you're constantly under the fight or flight or freeze. And how do you heal from that? How is essentially, is there hope? The answer, I can confidently tell you, is yes. And it takes a lot of work. It really takes a lot of work. And how it shows up in your adulthood is like I said, constipation. It can show up as headaches. It can show up as other diseases. It can show up as trouble in romantic relationships. It
Yeah.
can show up in not knowing how to manage one's emotions once they start allowing themselves to finally feel emotions and
Mm,
get all of those old emotions unstuck and out.
yeah.
It has been such a journey. And if people would have known me 20 years ago, they would have known somebody who at the heart is the same, but how I how I handle myself and how I show up in the world is much different, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
And it takes a lot of work. And I'll tell you, I've done a lot of stuff. I've done, and I continue to do therapy, which I
Yeah.
recommend to every single human being, whether you went through trauma or not, because I
Yeah.
think talking to an unbiased professional is extremely healthy. And I think prioritizing health,
Yes.
sleep, stress management, proper nutrition, and really healthy exercise. All of these things are wonderful. Surrounding yourself with people who are of the same mindset, who want to grow, who want to be better, who want to get out of that victim mentality. This
Mm,
is highly, highly important.
yeah.
Surrounding yourself with those kinds of good people. And everything else under the sun. I've done some more wild things too. I've gone to the Amazonian jungles and done, ayahuasca, because that's also stuff that interests me. I've done 10-day silent meditation retreats. I
Mm,
there's a lot, and I think that everybody's journey looks a little different. I think you have to do what is calling to you,
yeah.
and everybody has a choice. You can either heal from this kind of stuff and lead and live a more healthy life where you feel balanced and you feel happy and you feel excited about the next day and what's to come, or you can or you cannot. You
Mm,
cannot. You don't have to grow.
yeah.
You can stay stuck. You can
Mm,
invite disease. You can invite your immune system to constantly be taxed. You can be unhappy. You can feel alone. There it's up to people. It's their choice. It's
yeah.
their life. It's their choice.
That was powerful. It's a choice at the end of the day. It's very easy to blame, and it doesn't make whatever the situation was. That's not to say you can't, somebody wasn't responsible, right? But I do believe we have to get to a point to where we do make a conscious choice to say, I'm not going to stay stuck. I'm going to make sure that I can be better for myself so I can be better for those I'm called to, better for my children, better for my friends, but first, better for me at the end of the day. And that choice can impact your entire life, your entire life. And, I did want to be clear real quick about, I'm always careful when I bring up my kids. And I think the trauma that I experienced impacted them because of what they saw. So I just want to be clear. I think it's important if we are in relationships with people and we have to care for children, we are responsible to make sure that we protect them and we keep them safe even if it doesn't make sense to society, because society will say you need to stay married and work it out, in spite of. So I just wanted to be clear that their trauma was not necessarily directly with them, but it was what they saw within that situation. That was more a traumatic experience. So, but anyways, at the end of the day, I had to make a choice. And it was hard because not because I didn't want to leave the relationship, it was hard because I wanted to keep that family, that vision, keep them to get everybody together. Even if it wasn't that healthy, we'll figure it out. So I think at the end of the day, it's very, very, very important to make a conscious choice to also ensure that you can be healthy and you don't have to deal with constipation and gut issues, sleep deprivation, because that's another big one, Kat. And I'm sure you've had this experience with clients, maybe. A lot of people are struggling with sleep. Like everybody is sleep deprived. They're like, I can't get to sleep, or I wake up through the night. And I'm like, what's happening when you're trying to go to sleep? They're like, my mind is just always going. It's always going. And I think a lot of that is connected to trauma, oftentimes, or it's connected to some type of stressor. And so it's like, okay, let's do some deep breathing. Let's do the 4-7-8 method where you hold your breath for 4, or inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8, to just calm your system down, calm the nervous system down. But I think, again, it goes back, if you're having sleep deprivation and it started suddenly, it could be hormonal, but it also could be some type of emotional distress. And we know sleep deprivation leads to so many diseases.
Yes,
So
it
it's like
does.
a domino effect, you know?
Sleep is so important. We should do a whole episode dedicated to sleep
Oh, yeah.
because I feel like when people are short on time or
Yeah.
they need just one thing to focus on, out of stress management, out of sleep, out of nutrition, and out of working out, I
Yeah.
always say prioritize your sleep. If we only get one thing to work on right now, prioritize that sleep because when you are deprived, you're not giving your body proper time to rejuvenate, restore, repair, all of these good things.
Yeah.
And when you wake up in the morning, your mood is affected. You're more irritable. You are more accident prone. You are more injury prone. You make poorer decisions with the foods that you are going to eat because your body is still stressed out. Mind is still stressed out. You're going to crave salt, sugar, fats. And
So,
so I I would love to just talk with you more just on sleep and how that can be a big game changer for folks.
big, big game changer. Absolutely. So, this has been an amazing conversation. We could go on and on. There's so much about emotional distress and trauma and how it connects to our body. Um,
I didn't even touch on the one example that there was a story that's very near and dear to me that I want to share. But next time I'm gonna write it down because it's really powerful, and I'm wondering if maybe
mm,
just even one person hears this story out there, if they're going to be like, oh my God, I need to change this in my life. Like if it will be enough to to be the catalyst for people to do a healthy change. But
mm,
I know
mm.
that's a bit of a cliffhanger, but I promise I will share it on the next one.
That's it. That means you have to tune in next time,
Yes,
y'all.
you do. Jamila, you are fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day and goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.